Hello, I'm Mark McCulley, Chief Executive Officer of the American Angus Association, and thanks for joining. This video is really built to walk you through the structure and the governance of the American Angus Association. Our structure is really designed to serve you as members and enable us to offer very diverse programs and services as a total organization. And the presentation will be designed to also walk through the governance and how decision-making happens at the American Angus Association and its entities, and ultimately how the members have input and influence and set the direction of this great organization. The American Angus Association has a very long and a very storied heritage, starting all the way back that we know of 1873 when George Grant brought those first 3 bulls over to Victoria, Kansas. But the association started 10 years later in 1883. It was first founded as the American Aberdeen Angus Breeders Association. It was established really just down the road in Independence, Missouri. Later in 1888, it moved up to Iowa, had an office in 1890 in Harvey, Illinois. But in 1902, as many would know, the association set up a headquarters at the Chicago Union Stockyards as a part of the Purebred Livestock Record Building there in Chicago. Of course, there was the fire in 1934 where a lot of records were destroyed, but so many of the association's most important documents were in a fireproof safe and file cabinets, as I understand at the time. So many of that heritage and that documentation was saved through those fires. And then in 1956, the association board of directors made the decision to have a permanent location. It was down to 3 sites. Many know that there was many different sites that were competing to house the permanent location of the American Angus Association. It boiled down to Lincoln, Nebraska, and Hutchinson, Kansas, but ultimately St. Joseph, Missouri was chosen as the home of the American Angus Association in 1956. That was then. Fast forward to today, the American Angus Association is over 21,000 members strong, and that includes both our adult members as well as our junior membership. In 2024, we crossed the 21 million head registration mark into the herd book that was first established and first started when we started recording back in 1883. We today have 5 separate entities, or wholly owned subsidiaries, or 4 wholly owned subsidiaries of the American Angus Association. We have a team of now nearly 300 people that get up every day and advance this organization and its different enterprises. And the organization has obviously grown from a financial standpoint. We have about a $75 million a year in consolidated revenue across all of the entities. And the organization has grown to now amass close to $100 million in consolidated assets. Now, that number is a little bit deceiving, maybe to some. It's to understand what those assets are about. Obviously, the vast majority of those would sit in our investment portfolio. Obviously, we have assets in buildings and such, but we have assets largely in an investment portfolio. Of course, many would know a big percentage of that investment portfolio is in our Angus Foundation, and those dollars are restricted to specific use. But nonetheless, it is a big organization with a large financial obligation and importance as we look and govern this association moving forward. From a governance standpoint, I really first start at the Breeders' Reference Guide, and I think most members are familiar, at least with parts of this Breeders' Reference Guide. It's got the association rules and our policies, but for today's presentation, really want to focus on the first part, and that's our charter and ultimately the bylaws of this association that were first established when the association was established and has been since modified over the years by boards and ultimately by the convention of delegates that happens at the annual meeting. I want to call your attention specifically to the very first part, and that is the charter, and that really spells out what the organization is here to do. And I think sometimes that is something that is, as members, maybe we understand 1 or 2 parts, but maybe haven't fully digested that full charter of the American Angus Association. And so we look at that here a little bit deeper and pull that out, and it's really 3 parts. And this charter was again initially established and since modified over the years. But it starts with first the charter to maintain the purity of the certain cattle of the breed originally known as Polled Aberdeen Angus, now known as Angus, okay, right? So maintain the purity of Angus cattle. And I think that's normally what we think about, of course, with the breed registry. The second part of the charter is to collect, verify, preserve, and publish the pedigrees and information and data as it deems necessary to promote that breed of cattle. And then the third part of the overall charter, I call it kind of the catch-all, but it was, I think, the wisdom of past boards and delegates and members to say, you know what, we're not sure we can always predict exactly what we want the association to do to benefit the breed and to benefit the members. And so this third part is a part of the charter that says that to perform any other acts that best promote the interests of that breed of cattle, of course, Angus. Okay, so that is the charter. And I ultimately come back to that when we think about what is this organization established to do. Now, those words are important, but over time, of course, the organization has also had mission statements. And these mission statements tend to be a little bit more clear, a little bit more concise, and maybe more speak to us in today's language. And over time, mission statements have been revised slightly. This is the mission statement that we've had for several years and operate with today. Again, as I mentioned, we have 5 entities, 4 entities under the association parent. But ultimately, there's one overarching mission statement. And that mission statement, again, of course, ties to our charter. It's about programs, resources, and leadership that improve and promote the Angus breed. It enhances the livelihoods of family farmers and ranchers and ultimately exceed consumer expectations, right? And so that mission statement really is the overarching mission that we think about advancing every day, whether you're here in St. Joe or Worcester, Ohio with certified Angus beef, whether you're working in Angus Media, AGI, or the Foundation, it ultimately is about advancing this one collective mission. I want to give you a little bit of an outline of our entities or our wholly owned subsidiaries that sit under the American Angus Association. As I mentioned earlier, of course, the American Angus Association was established in 1883. In 1978, the Certified Angus Beef program was started. Now, it was later formed organizationally into a limited liability company in 2000, so it's Certified Angus Beef LLC today. But that program was established as a committee and then ultimately as a standalone subsidiary in 2000. Angus Media was first established in 1979 as Angus Productions Incorporated. We do business as Angus Media today. Of course, that was started with the purchase of the Angus Journal and has since grown significantly over those years. The Angus Foundation was established in 1980, and the most recently established of the entities was in 2007 with Angus Genetics Incorporated, or operated as AGI. Now, I think it's also important to acknowledge that not each of these entities is set up the same way. The American Angus Association is set up as a not-for-profit 501c5 not-for-profit organization, as well as Certified Angus Beef. Certified Angus Beef is also set up as a not-for-profit entity. Now, of course, CAB is funded a little bit differently and the funding source of Certified Angus Beef comes from royalties paid on use of the trademark by our packers and processors. And that's been the case since the very early 1980s. Early on, the association was putting money into the Certified Angus Beef program. By about 1983, I believe, the revenue of Certified Angus Beef from commissions and royalties were enough to cover the expenses, and Certified Angus Beef has been self-sufficient from a revenue standpoint in that regard ever since. But it is a not-for-profit entity. Angus Media was again established in 1979. It is a for-profit entity. The Angus Foundation, of course, as a foundation, operates as a 501c3, so kind of as we think of a traditional not-for-profit type of organization. And then Angus Genetics Incorporated, or AGI, is set up and was established by the board at that time also as a for-profit entity. And I think it's important to know and understand those differences. Angus Media and AGI both operate as a for-profit. It gives them the ability to explore some business opportunities that might reach beyond our American Angus Association membership, but ultimately derive profits that come back and can be used to offset membership programs and services and advancing the overall mission. So let's get in a little bit to the governance and the decision-making process of the American Angus Association and its entities. It really begins with the members. Ultimately, the governance of this association is member-driven. The American Angus Association membership, if you are an eligible voting member, and that is defined in our Breeders' Reference Guide, have the ability to nominate either themselves or others to be a delegate. And then those eligible voting members elect the delegates from their particular state or district to go and represent them at the annual convention of delegates. The number of delegates per state is a formula that's built on both the membership of that particular state or district as well as the number of animals registered in that particular state or district. And so some states have more delegates than others, representative of both their membership and the number of registered cattle in that particular state. Those delegates, once elected, come to the annual convention and convention of the delegates, or our annual meeting, and do the business of the association. In particular, would make any changes to our bylaws, and of course, at that point, elect the board of directors that go on to be that serve in those terms. And then the association board of directors, many times I call them the big board, they are the ones that ultimately elect the board of directors for each of the entities. And I'll get into that in just a little more detail. When we look at the board of directors, it's comprised of individuals are elected to serve a 3-year term, and they can serve 2 consecutive 3-year terms. So you ultimately end up with a 15-member board of directors. You also have an officer team established as the president and the chairman, the vice president and a vice chairman. There's also a treasurer elected, and then the chief executive officer is a non-voting member of the board, obviously serves in that executive administrative capacity. So to give you some idea then, when we say we have board meetings, as I always say, we technically have 5 separate board meetings. It is important that each of these entities operates and governs independently. And that is, as we say, piercing the corporate veil would be obviously a problem if the decision-making and the governance of these entities was done outside of their established structure. So today we have the Angus Media, Certified Angus Beef, AGI, and the Angus Foundation that all have a separate board of directors. Many of them are as I always say, a subset of the big board of the American Angus Association, but they are a dedicated board to do the business and make the decisions of that particular entity. The association is a little unique in that it also has committees, a set of committees that are very important element of how the association board works. It gives the board the ability to get down into maybe more specific details, can investigate topics even further, and work in smaller groups and ultimately either make decisions or bring recommendations back to the full board, but having done a lot of that extra work in a smaller group. So they're very, very important to the overall effectiveness. Committees are made up of 5 directors that are voted into their position by the full board. We have the executive committee, and it has a couple different purposes, but it's largely designed to be a committee that can work between meetings of the full board of directors if a decision is needed to be made between, again, our established board meetings. Any decision made by that executive committee is then reported back out at the next full board meeting. Then there's 6 other committees that meet on a very regular basis. We tend to do these very much virtually, and many times a couple of weeks before the full board meeting, to where we can get a lot of that work done. We can get into a lot of the details. If there's some further questions, we've got a couple weeks to get that work done as staff to bring it to the full board when we get together. But those 6 other committees are breed improvement, commercial programs, communications and public relations. We have an events and junior activities committee, a finance and planning committee, and then also a member services committee. So again, very, very important function of the American Angus Association Board of Directors. The other entities or the subsidiaries do not have a similar committee. So we'll take a little deeper look into each of these boards and their structure. So the American Angus Association, or AAA board, as I mentioned earlier, is a 15-member board, along with 2 or 3 officers. It kind of depends on how the years fall. A treasurer can be elected and be either within their second term or outside their second term. So it does sometimes we have 18. Currently we have 17. Most frequently we would have 17. But the chairman and the president of the board is elected by the delegates at the annual convention of delegates. The vice chairman and vice president of the board is also elected at that same time. The treasurer position is actually elected by the American Angus Association board. We do that in the September board meeting for them to serve in that treasurer capacity for the following year. And then each of the entities, or the wholly owned subsidiaries, have 9-member boards. Now these are comprised a little different, and the composition of these boards is a little different than the American Angus Association board by design. These were the way it was structured by boards in the past, in particular to say, you know what, there might be some times where we need an outside perspective or an outside representative to serve with an expertise that can serve on these individual boards, and they made an allowance for that. So for example, the AGI board is a 9-member board. The CEO serves as the vice chairman of these different entity boards. In this case, the AGI president also serves on that board as a voting member of that board. There is an industry representative, and so this again gives the ability of there's a nominating committee of the board that goes out and looks for expertise and folks that have a willingness and an interest to serve on that on the AGI or the Angus Media or CAB or Angus Foundation boards. They bring that in front of the board to vote on, and that is a regular process that's been in place for some time. And then the other 6 members of the AGI board would be folks that sit as directors of the American Angus Association board. Certified Angus beef is set up exactly the same way. Obviously, the CAB president serves on the CAB board, along with an industry representative and the CEO and 6 other board members. Angus Media, again, the exact same way. And then Angus Foundation is set up a little bit differently. It was redesigned in 2019. The board at that time took a look at the structure of the Angus Foundation board and did a little bit of reorganization. So that board sets with a 9-member board as well. The CEO is ex officio, as well as the executive director. And then we have an ability to have up to 2 at-large members of the association serve as Angus Foundation directors. We also have the opportunity to have an industry representative, and then of course the rest of the board is filled out with American Angus Association board members. Okay, and so each of these boards are established in November after the annual meeting, when the board comes together and reestablishes each of these entities, elects officers of these particular entities to set the organization up for the year to come. November is a time that the boards do meet. So as we first, the board usually meets right before the convention, and then immediately following the annual convention of delegates, the board will assemble and largely work through, again, the establishment of the committees, establishment of the entity boards at that point in time. The Certified Angus Beef LLC actually has a standalone board meeting in December. This was established years ago when, with the office, of course, of Certified Angus Beef in Worcester, Ohio, there was a possibility that someone would be on the American Angus Association board and possibly never be at the office of Certified Angus Beef. And so they established a standalone Certified Angus Beef LLC board meeting in December, while that's an opportunity for board members to travel to Worcester and to really take a much, much deeper dive into all of the things going on in that particular organization. February, we do have a full board meetings in February, again in June, and then again in September. And so that's the schedule for when the boards meet. Of course, staff prepare reports out to the board throughout the year. We do have committees that meet can for sure meet before board meetings, can meet as needed as they go throughout the year as well. So obviously, our members probably don't wake up and think about the American Angus Association and these different entities as these 5 standalone organizations, and that's by design. And it's obviously we want to leverage the skill set and the expertise, and we're all, of course, working towards one common mission here. And so there is a very close working relationship, while at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, there have to be some separation of these entities. Again, the term is that corporate veil that has to exist within each of these entities or wholly owned subsidiaries, and how we make decisions and govern it. But I know sometimes that can be confusing. It can even be confusing for us even as staff when we're all in the same building and you have multiple companies and we tend to think of ourselves all as Angus. But I wanted to kind of maybe walk through some of those supporting relationships and ways that the different entities work together, way we overlap, and where there's separation. So from an association standpoint, the association provides a number of services and support for Angus Media, Angus Genetics Incorporated, and Angus Foundation. Of course, those 3 entities, as most know, are located here in St. Joseph, Missouri, we're all in the same building. So it's logical that we would share resources around human resource accounting, information systems, and obviously the facility services, communication and marketing. The association team, the communication team supports AGI and the foundation in that regard. Certified Angus Beef, of course, located in Worcester, Ohio. There's a little more separation in terms of some of the human resources and even accounting functions, but there's obviously a corporate accounting function, a corporate administration function where there's overlap, and obviously a very, very close working relationship between the entities and the parent and the subsidiary. I'm going to walk through each one of these and again speak to the mission of the individual entity, and then again a little of the overlap or the separation with the parent. Angus Media, as I mentioned earlier, established in 1979, operates as Angus Media. Officially, we call it Angus Productions Incorporated, or even API. But the mission of Angus Media is to increase demand for registered Angus cattle by providing information, education, and integrated marketing solutions. Of course, when we think about what the Angus Media is responsible for and what the association is responsible for, there is a tremendous amount of overlap and a very, very, as I always say, hand-in-glove working relationship, as there should be. But the association communications and PR department really takes on responsibilities for association membership communication. But of course, we use the Angus Journal, a property and an effort of Angus Media, as our flagship publication. So there again, a very, very close working relationship between the entities in that regard. Angus.org, the website, the administration, and the content tends to sit with the responsibility on the association side. But there's obviously a lot of content, and any of the advertising that's done sits on the Angus Media side. Breed promotion obviously sits with the association as the national ad campaign, the building and the launch and the promotion of the Angus breed through our national ad campaign is a responsibility on the association side. Our educational programs, the video services we do for more internal use or educational purposes sits on the association side, and then real-time show coverage and the things that the team does there to cover the shows, both the winners and the candidates and all of the activities throughout those events. So that's examples of things that would sit on the association side. On the media side, or Angus Media side, obviously we have our publications. You remember Angus Media set up as a for-profit entity, and so opportunities that even exist in advertising for our members, as well as corporate advertising that want to advertise to our members. We also do the team does some great work on video as a marketing service, as well as maybe even some design elements. You think about our sale books and our advertising, and so just again trying to create some examples here to show you kind of a little bit of the separation, because I know sometimes there's some confusion. Is this an Angus Media thing? Is this an association thing? So hopefully that helps clarify some of those different roles and responsibilities. AGI would be another example of an entity where there's maybe at times confusion of where does the American Angus Association performance programs and our Breed Improvement Committee, where does that start and stop, and where does AGI pick up, right? And so I think it's important to even go back to when AGI was first rolled out, and this is a quote from Richard Tokash, who was the founding board chairman when AGI was first founded. Right? And it was formed to perform genetic evaluations, conduct research, and develop and improve new science and technology to benefit all producers who use Angus genetics. And that was kind of the purpose that AGI was rolled out with. But obviously when AGI first started, there was just a small number of staff. There was staff that wore hats of the association performance programs as well as AGI. So again, as AGI has grown, we've intentionally created just a little bit more separation between AGI staff and association staff, again, but still very much a hand-in-glove relationship between the parent and the entity. The goal, or the mission, if you will, the why of AGI is to lead genetic change for the beef industry in cooperation with Angus families. And again, I think you're familiar with all of the things that AGI is a part of in terms of the genetic evaluation, in terms of research. And this kind of, a little bit of a messy slide here, but it kind of walks through where things start and stop, and kind of how this relationship works between the American Angus Association and AGI. So when you think of the association, we almost think of the association as a client of AGI's, and AGI thinks of the association as a customer of theirs. So on the association side, the association is the data owner of the pedigrees, of our performance data. The genotypes all sit under the ownership of the American Angus Association. The association provides a communications and marketing service for AGI. Obviously, today, the work of AGI is largely IS and data driven, right? So information systems, services, the data storage, data processing, all of that works with the staff and the systems of the American Angus Association. On the other side of the ledger here is AGI, right? A service provider does the genetic evaluation for the association, provides the genomic testing service for members of the association. Obviously, those results are what go into our genomically enhanced EPDs. They bring a technical expertise, obviously a very, very talented group that's sought after, and we have experts that speak around the world because of their technical expertise and the knowledge that they bring around genetic evaluation. And I think of AGI as our research arm, right? And does providing the research capability for the American Angus Association. So as we kind of think about this, we have this Breed Improvement Committee that kind of sits in the middle, if you will, kind of the conduit, right? So the needs of the American Angus Association around genetic selection tools are communicated and established by the Breed Improvement Committee and communicated to AGI as a service provider. And then AGI provides those tools and services back to the association, where the association is able to then deploy those through our systems, our pedigrees, as you know them as EPDs, indexes, and that sort of thing. Not to mention the services that we have around parentage and testing for genomic conditions. So again, I know there's at times some confusion between the lines of the American Angus Association and AGI, and I hope that maybe clears up a little of how this relationship exists today. The Angus Foundation, a little more clean in terms of the mission and the purpose and how the foundation works. Obviously, the foundation is here and has grown substantially over the years due to the generosity of our Angus family. It's really to build the legacy of Angus through education, youth, and research, ensuring success for future generations. Very, very close working relationship again with the American Angus Association, very specifically with the Events and the Junior Activities Department, also the Communications and PR Department, and then also AGI when we get into some research. So the programming, the youth programming, think about our LEAD conference or the National Junior Angus Show. Those come under the responsibility of the association. Programs like Beef Leaders Institute or other educational programs, the Beef Academy, those are executed. The programs are executed by the association team. Obviously research, again, as I mentioned earlier, largely with AGI. And then the association provides some communication and marketing services for the foundation. Now, the foundation obviously is here around fundraising and being able to bring in that financial support to support those pillars of education and youth and research. Play a very vital function in terms of donor relationships and member fellowship opportunities. So that financial support flows from the foundation, and then those programs are executed on the association side. Again, things like our youth programs, BLI Lead, and some of the other flagship leadership development programs that the association is able to offer because of the funding that comes from the foundation. And the fourth entity is Certified Angus Beef, and again, I don't think many understand the mission there. It's around, of course, increasing the demand for registered Angus cattle, but as we always say, it's really about focusing on the consumer. It's focusing on the end of the supply chain furthest from our registered Angus breeders, and it's about driving demand by producing a consistent eating experience to the consumer. As you know, the Certified Angus Beef program and LLC is headquartered in Worcester, Ohio, so there's not as much overlap in terms of administrative functions because of the distance that we're apart. But obviously there's still a very close working relationship. The commercial programs of American Angus Association as well as AGI's GeneMax program, obviously those are products available out in the commercial space that are tied to the demand and the opportunity with Certified Angus Beef premiums. Obviously the selection tools, so when you see targeting the brand on a pedigree or on an animal, that's tied to those EPD recommendations that were established in the best practices for Certified Angus Beef. On the other side, of course, Certified Angus Beef is here as the consumer marketing arm of the American Angus Association. It's the brand and the team that are interfacing with our end product, interfacing with our retailers, our distributors, and ultimately our consumer. As I mentioned earlier, the funding of Certified Angus Beef comes from revenue that's driven off of the trademark licensing. So for the production and use of the Certified Angus Beef trademark by our packers and processors. Obviously, they also work in some supply development efforts as well, working back with commercial producers and feed yards and registered breeders. And obviously there's some very strong beef industry relationships because Certified Angus Beef touches so many different facets of the beef supply chain, and we leverage those back and forth across the organization. So again, a little bit different kind of overlap and relationship, but nonetheless quite important. And I want to touch one more thing on, as I think about, and we think about the governance of this organization, I want to maybe specifically talk to just the role of financial stewardship that our board takes, and think about this in terms of how do we balance the programs that we know that our very diverse membership want the association to offer and to invest in with the revenue side, right? It's how do you balance these budgets each and every year? And so this is just a little illustration of how the association thinks about this. So on the revenue side is our traditional revenue. So think about our memberships, registration fees, transfers, our AHIR revenue that comes in, and as well as like AI certificates. We kind of classify those as our traditional revenue streams. We have entity contribution, and each of the entities contribute to the parent company in different ways, but they are a very significant part of the revenue side of the association to offer out our member services and all the things that the American Angus Association can offer. It is again, the entity contributions are a very important part of that equation. There's some alternative revenue, and the size of these squares probably don't represent the significance or the percentage. This would be some smaller revenue streams, but things around, our tag store, Angus Link, maybe even sponsorships to help us support our things like the Angus Convention. And then the fourth block on that revenue side is our investment income. I mentioned earlier, we have a very, very sizable portfolio in our investments. The vast majority of those are restricted in some way, but it does allow us to utilize some interest income off of those investments every year to subsidize the program expenses and to help balance those budgets. So that's just a 30,000-foot look at the financial stewardship and picture of the association in particular. But I think that was important, and I know sometimes there's questions about that. If you want to go deeper into that, we always have our annual report and the audited financial statements out on our website. If you want to dig into that deeper, of course, call any of us as staff or board members if you'd like to learn more. So that wraps up, really, I hope, what is a helpful guide and insight to the American Angus Association, both our structure and our decision-making or governance. I hope you leave with a little deeper understanding of how the entities fit together and how we ultimately, collectively, each and every day, advance on the mission of this great organization. But at the end of the day, it's all about our members and this great breed of cattle, and I hope you can see how those pieces fit together. As always, as you have more questions, want to learn more, it's excited to provide this video to give you that little extra glimpse, but hope that doesn't ever keep you from reaching out with any additional questions that you might have. Thank you for joining us.